start the meeting. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Preston City Council Virtual Audit Committee meeting. This meeting is being webcast and is available to view live. Before we continue with the agenda, I will ask Member Services Officer Lizzie Billsborough to confirm who is in attendance. Thank you, Lizzie.
So we've got yourself, Councillor Woolham, Vice Chair Councillor Saxena, Councillors Rollo and Shannon. We've got officers Jackie Wilding and Dawn Heighton, and external auditors we've got Andy Eyre and John Farrer. Thanks.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, before we start, I would like to confirm just a few housekeeping arrangements. All attendees should remain muted until invited to speak. Please keep your mobile phones on silent or switched off to avoid disruption when you are speaking. Please remember that we are broadcasting live. As the first item on the agenda is the Chair's announcements, I have no further announcement to make at this time. Can I ask Member Services on item 2, please, if there are any substitute members at this meeting?
No, there are no substitute members for this meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie. If we could move to item on the agenda, item 3, which, item 4, which is the minutes, and to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January 2020. Are members happy with the minutes from the last meeting?
Madam Chair.
Okay, could we have a seconder then, please, for the minutes?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Shannon.
Thank you, David. Right, moving to item 5 of the agenda next, please, the external audit plan. I'm going to welcome John Farrer from Grant Thornton, who just take us through the report, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just turn you first of all to page 6 of your act, which is page 2 of your plan. I just wanted to draw members' attention to a change to the audit manager for the council's external audit. I think at the last meeting I mentioned that my colleague Richard Tembo had left the firm. We've identified Andy Eyre as the replacement audit manager for the council's external audit. Andy, I don't know if you want to just come off mute briefly, just a brief introduction to the committee.
I'm muted. I joined the Liverpool office, Grant Thornton, at the beginning of March, just in time to be locked down. And I'd previously been with Grant Thornton working in public sector audit since June 14, so done about 6 years of public sector experience and worked on a variety of district London boroughs, pension funds and the like over that period. And I'm really looking forward to getting into Preston audit and getting to know more about the region and the city itself.
That's great. Thank you, Andy, and welcome. We'll look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Andy. Chair, I will probably need to leave just before 6 o'clock. I have a second audit committee this evening, so I'll need to give my apologies at that stage. Andy is able to stay for the remainder of the meeting.
That's great. Thank you very much, then, John.
Okay, so I'll take the committee through our external audit plan. It's the external audit plan for the 2019-20 financial year that ended at the end of March. Turning to page 7 of your pack, which gives an executive summary of the audit plan. The external audit plan is conducted in the context of the National Audit Office's Code of Audit Practice. And there are two key responsibilities in relation to the external audit: to form an opinion on the Council's financial statements for the financial year 1920, and to reach a conclusion on the Council's arrangements in relation to value for money for the financial year 2019-20, and I'll say a bit more about both of those in taking you through the report. So on page 7 we highlight what we call significant audit risks. These are the areas that we will focus most of our audit attention on, relating to management override of controls, the valuation of land and buildings on the Council's balance sheet, equally the measurement of the pension fund liability on the Council's balance sheet, and we've also reflected on the impact of COVID-19 in relation to preparation of 1920 accounts. So I'll say a bit more about those areas in just a few moments. The external audit is conducted with regard to materiality. So we determine a materiality calculation based on the size of the Council. It's based on prior year gross revenue expenditure. That's a figure of 2%, which equates to just over £1.6 million. That's an important figure because if we were to identify errors, misstatements, omissions above that figure, and the Council were to decline to amend its account, we wouldn't be able to give an opinion indicating the account to give a true and fair view. We will report through our audit findings report later in the year any errors, misstatements, omissions at a much lower threshold than that. So we set a triviality level, and any matters that we identify during the course of the audit above £83,000, we will communicate to you through our audit findings report. Our value for money work is also risk-based, and we've undertaken a risk assessment earlier in the year. We will be looking at the Council's arrangements in relation to financial sustainability, and also the Council's arrangements to manage potential financial risks in relation to the redevelopment of the city centre. In terms of the timetable for the audit plan we have in front of us was prepared back in May. Things have developed a little since May. At that time we were planning to undertake the audit between July and September. That's now going to be between August and October, but still within the timetable. MHCLG relaxed the timetable for 2019-20 accounts preparation and audit in view of the COVID pandemic. We set out on page 7 as well the independence of the Council. So I am independent of Preston City Council, and all members who work on the team to me will confirm their independence at key stages of the audit. I'll turn you to page 9 of your pack, page 5 of our plan, where we start to talk through the significant risk areas. First of those in relation to the revenue cycle. It's a risk that we're obliged to consider under the International Auditing Standards and ISA 240. It's one that we can rebut, and we've partially rebutted this risk in relation to income streams that relate to grants and taxpayer income, as we consider those to be predictable areas of income and ones where we can get a significant amount of assurance. Fees and charges is a material source of income to the Council, and we've not rebutted the risk there, and we will undertake a programme of work as set out on page 9. The other area that we're obliged to consider by the auditing standard ISA 240 is management override of controls. And this really is recognising that no matter how strong the organisation's internal control environment is, there is always the possibility that people in positions of trust could override that control environment. So we will undertake a programme of work there and consider significant judgments and estimates involved in the preparation of the Council's accounts. And we will undertake a programme of work to understand the Council's journal control environment and test a sample of journals that we consider to be of higher risk. On page 10, we set out a risk in relation to the valuation of land and buildings. Under the CIPFA Code of Accounting Practice, the Council is required to keep its asset valuations materially up to date at the period end. That can be over a rolling 5-year programme. There can be some significant assumptions and judgments in reaching a valuation. And clearly for 1920, we've also got the overlay of the possible impact of the pandemic on the valuation of property, plant and equipment at the balance sheet date. And indeed in external valuers' reports, we're often seeing reference to material uncertainty of evaluations at the balance sheet date. That could have a bearing on the audit reports that we give at the end of the audit process. That could include what we call an emphasis of matter paragraph. It's just important to note that is not, or would not be, a qualification of the audit report, but it would flag to readers of the accounts and readers of our opinion some important disclosures within the financial statements. On page 11, we flag a significant risk in relation to the valuation of the net pension liability. The assessment of that pension liability is a complicated matter involving measurement of both assets and liabilities well into the future. Some complicated actuarial calculations underpinning that measurement and a lot of assumptions. Sometimes the change in those assumptions can have a very significant impact on the measurement of the liability. So we will conduct a programme of work. We'll consider the data that's provided to the actuary. We'll assess the competence and capabilities of the actuary, and we'll review the actuary's report and ensure that that's been appropriately reflected within the financial statements. Last year we had the impact of the McLeod judgment, where it was found there was age discrimination in relation to the introduction of career average arrangements in the LGPS. That was taken into account in the actuary's report for 2018-19. MHCLG have just recently consulted on their proposed remedy in relation to removing that discrimination, and we will consider the possible impact on the measurement of the pension liability at the 31st of March 2020. On page 12, we refer to COVID-19 presenting risks in relation to the audit. I've already mentioned the possible risks in relation to measuring property, plant and equipment values at the 31st of March 2020. There are other areas of the accounts potentially impacted, for example, in relation to the recoverability of debtor balances included within the financial statements. So we will work with the Council's finance team to understand how the Council has taken into account the impact of COVID in preparing financial statements for 1920. I'll turn you then to page 14 of your pack and page 10 of our audit plan, other matters. This highlights some other responsibilities in relation to the external audit. We will read the narrative information published alongside the accounts, so the Council's narrative report and annual governance statement, to ensure they are consistent with our understanding of the Council. And we also undertake a programme of work on the whole of government accounts consolidation pack to ensure that that is consistent with the financial statements. We'll also give electors the opportunity to raise questions, and if there were to be objections in relation to the accounts, we would consider those. Page 15 of the pack and 11 of our audit plan sets out a little bit more detail in relation to audit materiality. And page 16 sets out some more information in relation to the value for money aspect of our audit. Sets out there the framework that the NAO has in place and the theme areas that we need to consider in assessing risks in this aspect of the audit. So the NAO require auditors to consider Council's arrangements for making informed decisions, for sustainably deploying your resources, and for working with partners and third parties. We've identified the 2 risk areas on the right-hand side of page 16 of your pack to consider. I think it's just important to note that the value for money conclusion work relates to the 2019-20 financial year in the same way as we're auditing the accounts for 2019-20. When we move into auditing 2021, we're likely to see COVID-19 feature as a risk area for the 2021 value for money conclusion work. Page 17 of the pack, 13 of the plan, sets out a little bit more detail in terms of the members of the audit plan and the timetable for conducting the audit and the respective responsibilities of the council and ourselves as auditors. Section 9 of the audit plan, pages 18 of your pack, sets out the proposed audit fee for the 2019-20 external audit, fee of just over £54,000. And we're going into a little bit more detail on page 19 in terms of the makeup of that fee relative to the PSAA scale fee. Page 20 of the plan, just again confirmation of independence and the confirmation here that we do some other work for the council. We undertake work to certify the council's annual housing benefit subsidy claim. At the time of drafting the audit plan, the fee for that work hadn't been determined and proposed. I can now confirm a fee proposal of £16,500 for the certification of the 1920 claim. Pause there, Chair. Happy to take any questions that members may have on the audit plan for 1920.
Sure, is that not on page 20? Should that not be 12,000?
Sorry, Councillor.
You just said about 16,500 for a certification of housing benefits 1890. Oh, that's the certification 1920.
1920, yes.
Which isn't mentioned in there.
Okay, John, thank you for that summary. We'll come to questions in a short minute. Could I just go back to item 3 about declarations of interest, please? Are there any declarations of interest to be made before we follow on? And if you find that during the discussion that you do have an interest to declare, please could you indicate on the instant message facility by the speech bubble by typing DOI, and the scrutiny support manager will then invite you to speak. Lizzie, did we have any declarations of interest, please?
No, no one's got a declaration of interest. Thank you.
Right, that's fine. Thank you. Can I just remind everyone at this point that if you wish to speak on any item, whilst it's on the discussion, could you please indicate via the instant messaging system by typing RTS for request to speak. That would be great. Thank you. Going back to the audit report, John, thank you very much for that. Can we just go to any questions for John on the external report, please?
Councillor Rollo has requested to speak. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Rollo, would you like to put your question forward, please?
Yeah. On page 15 of the report, on page 18 of the report, raising the bar at 2,500. My reading of that is that they, FRC are saying that audit companies aren't doing the job properly and need to do more. So why do we have to pay for it as a council? Why isn't that a corporate cost to the auditors?
Okay, just come off mute there, Chair, and thank you for the question. So, a little bit of background to that point. So, external audit, I mean, is a very heavily regulated activity, and you are quite right. The FRC has laid down the challenge to the audit firms working on both public sector and corporate audits to improve audit quality. Certainly over the last couple of years, those regulatory expectations have increased very significantly, and what constitutes good audit and good quality audit has shifted quite considerably in the last couple of years. In response to that, the audit firms are having to undertake quite significant increased levels of work in certain areas. We've talked about the significant risk areas around property, plant and equipment valuation and around actuarial valuations. There's just an increasing expectation from the regulator that we will further challenge the assumptions applied by those experts. So in years gone by, probably more of an acceptance of the work of external experts, now an increasing need to challenge those and challenge those further and in more granular detail. Unfortunately, the consequences of not meeting the regulator's audit standards can be very, very punitive to the audit firms. Can be 6- and 7-figure audit fines associated with that. So in common with the other firms, we are putting additional resource into audits at different levels. So more junior audits, time going into audits to undertake more testing, more reviewer time and more senior audit time to help challenge management and help challenge external experts. So we're absolutely committed to responding to the challenges laid down by the FRC, to raising the bar in terms of audit quality. Really, there has been a change in the scope of audit work required over recent years. That, coupled with the downward pressure on audit fees for at least the last 8 years. Back in 2012, we had a 40% reduction in external audit fees in the local government sector. Just a couple of years ago, there was a further 23% reduction on top of that 40% reduction. Audit fees have just got to an unsustainable level there where we can't mop up the additional costs of additional work to meet the rising regulatory expectations. That's sort of a little bit of context. I'm happy to take further questions there, Chair.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions I'd like to clarify, if I may. Appreciate it. You've got to go and Andy can fill in that. That's fine, John. But just in relation to the significant risks that have been identified from the report, just mention a couple of them. The reference to income from fees, charges and other service income, and the fact that this income is regarded as a material risk. With regards to Preston City Council, could you just expand a little bit on that for the benefit of members of the committee, please? Thank you.
Sorry, just coming off mute, Chair. So certain of the income streams of the council, the grants from central government, council tax and NDR are rather more predictable, and we're able to obtain audit assurance without having to undertake a significant programme of work. In relation to fees and charges income, that's potentially subject to more variability from one year to the next. Making sure that revenue is recognised in the appropriate financial year is important, and just in 2018-19 we had a new financial reporting standard, IFRS 15, in terms of revenue recognition. So we need to assure ourselves that the council has appropriately recognised revenue in accordance with that standard and the code of practice and within the correct financial year. It's a risk, I say, we're obliged to consider as a result of the auditing standard 240, and one that we've decided that we won't rebut that presumed risk in relation to. So we will conduct a programme of work there as set out in the plan.
Okay, thank you, John. Another sort of question is on the valuation of land and buildings investment properties. Again, that's been highlighted as a significant risk. Could you just expand again a little bit more on that risk? And what sort of actions do you think need to be taken as far as the council is concerned? Please, thank you.
Okay, so as far as the council is concerned, at this stage, I would believe the actions have already been taken in relation to the 1920 accounts. So that's really commissioning your valuation work for the 1920 cycle. I mentioned the code of practice allows some flexibility where valuations across the council's portfolio can take place over a period of time. There's an overarching requirement for material accuracy of those balances at year end. The code sets out different valuation approaches for different types of assets. There'll be the investment properties that might be surplus. There's different approaches for assets in the course of construction, for specialised assets and non-specialised assets. So the council will have instructed a valuer to undertake that expert work with regard to the code. We will review through the course of the audit that valuer's work. We will take account of the data that's been provided to the actuary. Sorry, not to the actuary, to the valuer. We'll consider the results of that work, and we will discuss the work of the valuer as well. Seek to understand the key assumptions that have applied in conducting their work and apply challenge to those assumptions and to the work of the valuer. We have access through NAO's arrangements to work of Gerald Eve. They're valuation experts. We have access to market indices and market data that we can use to challenge the local information that's produced in the Preston accounts. So we will do that as well. I don't think there's anything I'd expect the council to be doing at this stage other than to help and respond to audit queries as they may arise over the coming months.
Okay, thank you very much for that, John. And just finally on COVID-19, obviously very concerning, but this is a significant risk, of course, for the council, as with all councils. But are you confident that you're able to monitor the ongoing progress of the council to ensure that we're functioning correctly to minimise potential risk as a result of COVID? But how would you propose to test those risks, particularly where more and more officers are home-based?
So COVID's presenting an immediate challenge for the council and our team as external auditors in conducting the 1920 external audit remotely and verifying evidence and additional use of video conferencing like the meeting we're on today. So that's presenting an immediate challenge. Nobody's conducted audits in this way previously, but we've gathered some really helpful experience through our NHS audits, which concluded at the end of June. There are, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, certain aspects of the accounts that could well be impacted. So valuers caveating their work in relation to valuation of property, plant and equipment and investment property. So we will seek to understand that. The balances within the accounts of council tax balances, NDR balances, trade debtor balances. There is a question around recoverability of those, so we will work to understand the finance team's assessment of potential and expected credit losses. So that's I suppose the more here and now and the work that we'll be undertaking to give our opinion on the accounts and our value for money conclusion for 1920. Clearly, the impact of COVID began to be felt in the middle of March. We had lockdown in the middle of March, but really many of the impacts are bearing on the 2021 financial year. So I think when we bring forward an audit plan for 2021, you can probably expect to see COVID-19 in relation to the value for money, and we'll be considering the arrangements the council has in place to respond to the COVID pandemic. When answering your question around how we gain assurance, we will continue to hold meetings with senior officers of the council. We've already started that process of dialogue. We absolutely don't expect the council to be producing new working papers and new packs of evidence for the external audit, but we will take account of reports through to council, the arrangements you've put in place, the revised governance arrangements in place as a result of COVID. I think probably the other thing to mention is the annual governance statement for 2019-20. So whilst that is a governance statement for the year just ended, the requirements for preparation of the annual governance statement extend to a forward look, and where there have been significant changes to governance arrangements, financial controls and so on, they should be reflected in the annual governance statement that will be concluded and signed off in the autumn. So again, we'll work with officers to understand that that's a fair reflection of the revised arrangements in place. So some immediate impacts and some longer term impacts, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, John. I have no further questions. Any other questions from any other members of the committee?
No, Councillor, we've got no other indications of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is the internal audit plan. And could I just thank John and Andy for their time this evening. So I think Dawn is going to bring us in with the internal audit plan. So Dawn, would you like to talk us through that, please?
Can I just check, has there been a report missed from external audit in between? The progress report.
Were you wanting to go through the progress report, John or Andy?
I could briefly speak around it if members would like me to. But it's not a great deal in there. I can just run through it briefly.
I think, yeah, possibly if we could just quickly run through that before we move to item 6, that would be great, Andy. Thank you.
Sure. So it starts on page 25 of the pack. It's all just overviews, just giving it says a progress update on how the audit's going so far. So on page 28, it starts with the financial statements audit, which, as John's already mentioned, we'll be doing bulk of work in August through to October. We've not yet had the draft financial statements, so we've not done any detailed work on that, but we did do some work on additions and operating expenditure during interim, and we've got no findings to report from there. John's already touched in detail on value for money, so that's just a bit more around that. On page 29, it talks about some of the other work we do for the councils, such as housing benefit certification. We've not started that in earnest yet, though there are a couple of checklists that we send to the council revenues and benefits team to prepare, but we have shared them already, and we're still working on arrangements for delivering the detailed work later on in the summer. On to page 31 is the audit deliverables. Some of these, like the audit plan and interim findings, we'd expect to have delivered in April, but due to COVID-19 and council audit committees, they only come into committee now, and the audit findings report would have been expected to be delivered today, but as John's already covered, the deadlines are extended, so this will be delivered once we've completed the work in October, but the deadline is the end of November, so definitely before that. And then from page 32 to the end of the report is some sector updates of some reports that members and officers might find of interest. Particularly there's one, the first one is, I think John had a big part in writing around the impact of COVID-19 on financial reporting, and that's sort of particularly prescient for finance officers. I think we shared it with them when it was first published, so hopefully they picked all of that stuff up. I don't propose to go through any of the other reports in detail.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. Thank you. Lucy, do we have anybody wanting to ask any questions so far?
Not on that part of the agenda, I don't think. I think Councillor Saxena wants to speak on item 6.
Item 6. Okay, well, thank you. We'll move to item 6 on the agenda now, which is the internal audit plan. And again, could I just ask Dawn if she'd like to run through that with us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, the audit plan is part of the remit, approving the audit plan is part of the remit of the Audit Committee, and it's usually presented in April every year. Obviously, due to the pandemic, this did not happen, and so therefore this is the first time the annual plan has come before this committee. Since April, the internal audit team has been very heavily involved with supporting the council in the delivery of the business support grants, and this work is actually still continuing. We do, however, need to ensure that we undertake sufficient reviews over the course of the year to be able to form an opinion at the end of March 21. Therefore, the plan you have before you today contains 175 days for COVID support work and a range of other reviews for completion during the latter half of the year. The plan's attached as an appendix, and I apologise for it being so small in the initial agenda pack. However, you should now have received a readable version. Just a quick note as well that if the situation changes further and we're able to complete more reviews over the course of the year, I will bring back a further plan for approval for this by this committee. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Saxena wants to speak on this item. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Saxena, would you like to ask your question, please? Councillor Saxena there, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
5.1 on page 22. I had, it does point out that the internal audit team have been deployed on various other work, mainly to do with COVID-19 response. All these items, presumably, that are regarded as part of the council's activities and therefore be subject to audit. I just wonder what would happen with the audit of these particular items, considering the fact that the internal audit are actually operating them.
Yeah, we have considered that you know, it does to some extent impair our independence. But the good news in terms of this is that because I'm shared with both Files and Preston, we can draw upon audit resource from there as well. So if it came to that we needed to carry out any audit work of the business support grants that we've been involved with, we have got that independent view as well.
Okay, do we have any other questions from members of the committee for Dawn?
Nobody else has indicated to speak. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could I then just ask if we could move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is referring to the review of the effectiveness of the internal audit. Now on this, we've been asked if we would note the results of the self-assessment as part of the Audit Committee's consideration of the system of internal control. So we need to know the results of that. Could you run through that with us, please, Dawn, again? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is again another annual report and is presented to the committee to demonstrate that the internal audit service complies or conforms, depends which word you want to use, with the public sector internal audit standards. The purpose of this is so that both the council and the committee know that the work undertaken by the service and that the opinion formed in the annual report can be relied upon. Again, I've attached the checklist as an appendix, and as you can see, it's very comprehensive and covers things from our own internal processes to our working papers to how we set the plan to the attribute standards that we're expected to hold. It's very comprehensive, and again, I think we've demonstrated in full that we do fully conform with the requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions on either the checklist or the report.
Any questions on the report or checklist?
Councillor Rollo's requested to speak.
Okay, Councillor Rollo, would you like to ask your question, please? Thank you.
Just trying to unmute. Yes, on page 65. The last report to Audit Committee was November 2014. At that time, David Cameron was Prime Minister and we'd never even considered a referendum. Isn't it time that that was brought up to date with the committee?
Yeah, that particular report relates to the requirement for, within the public sector internal audit standards, there's a requirement for the self-assessment to be externally assessed and verified once every 5 years. And in 2014, a report was brought to the committee to request their approval to join the Lancashire-wide peer review process, which we did, and the review was carried out in 2017. Now, we're actually making plans for the next cycle of reviews, and Preston's is due in 2022. So nearer the time, I'll bring back another report explaining how it will work and what the process will be for our next external review.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Dawn. Do we have any other questions regarding that report, please?
Yes, I've got a question on page 67.
Would you like to ask your question then?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Yes, so it's 1322, disclosure of non-conformance. We've got a non-applicable there. Shouldn't we be reporting that there were no incidents rather than it's not applicable? That is positive reporting.
That is something we can take on board for next time.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I just took it on the view that we hadn't had any instances and therefore I didn't need to say anything. But I take it on board and I will report positively next time.
Or negatively, say that there weren't any. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Any other final questions on that?
Councillor Saxena has requested to speak.
Okay, Councillor Saxena, would you like to put your, please?
Just on the same argument, I think it would be better if Councillor Rollo had suggested that we did it but then you could say it conform. I think it's a lot better than it put it conform rather than putting them all out. Because the fact that you said you haven't any to ask it, report, aren't you?
Okay, I'll take that on board for next time.
Okay, thank you for that. If we could just move on to agenda item 8, please. And this is related to the internal audit annual report. Now, I think again, if is Dawn going to take us through this particular report?
Yes, thank you, Chair, I will.
Okay, thank you very much.
Again, thank you. This is our internal audit annual report, and as it states in the summary, there are 3 purposes for this report. It's to provide a summary of all the work undertaken over the course of the year by the internal audit. It's to provide feedback on our own performance, but most importantly, it's to provide the opinion on the Council's framework of control, risk management and governance. If I can draw your attention to page 87, which is the opinion, you can see that substantial assurance has been awarded for 3 areas that we consider. So that's the internal control, the risk management and the governance. Having had a look locally at other outcomes, that is an excellent opinion for this council. In terms of the plan for 1920, members will recall that we had quite a challenging year in terms of resources. When we brought the plan to you to be approved in April 19, it was already quite challenging, and it already required us to buy in some additional resource. And then to add to that, we unfortunately lost a member of the team during the summer of last year. So obviously it's had quite a massive impact on our ability to deliver the plan, despite us being able to backfill using some temporary resource. What we've done is we've therefore deferred some reviews to either 2021 or 21-22, again as a result of the pandemic. We tried to consider which reviews to defer based on the level of inherent risk within each system. We also had some reviews which were in progress at the end of the year, which normally we would have, in normal circumstances, we would have just been able to finish, but unfortunately that work just came to a halt. But as soon as we're able to just pick up that work again, I'll bring back the results from those reviews as soon as I can. Nevertheless, we were able to complete 14 reviews, and the pie chart on page 40 of your pack shows the assurance rating of each one. If I could just a note of caution here that the review of trees was actually given a limited assurance. I think the colouring's just gone slightly awry on the pie chart, so it was limited and not minimal. Paragraph 7.7, that goes on to explain that the control environment has remained stable and is comparable to previous years, so that again that's another positive for the council. In terms of the agreement of management actions, we have had 100% agreement of all our actions, but again it's been agreed with the chair that considering the current position of the council and the workload of officers and the way the council's had to operate over the past few months, it's not really been feasible to ask managers about the implementations of agreed actions. However, as the situation is now normalising slightly, we're intending to start picking that up again in the coming months. And what I'll do is I'll bring back a full report on if there are any issues about the implementation of agreed actions. As explained earlier, our own performance has been impacted due to the lack of resources, and you can see we haven't met our own targets. We are now fully resourced, so hopefully that won't be an issue going forward. And last but not least, as required by the public sector internal audit standards, I've included details of our own improvement actions in Appendix B, and you can see both of them which we're making good progress with. But I'm happy to answer again any questions.
Thank you very much for that report, Dawn. I think we've got quite a few questions for you on this. Lizzie, could you So
Yeah, we've got questions from Councillor Saxena and Councillor Shannon.
Okay, Councillor Saxena and Councillor Shannon, please. Thank you.
Page 90. I'm glad that the tree maintenance is actually limited rather than nominal. It's still though not totally good. I'm wondering, because we quite often do this in other committees, that we actually, at some appropriate point, we invite the relevant officers to explain to us what's being done to resolve some of the issues and plan what's going to be mitigated in the end. I do know there have been issues because I'm dealing with one ward at the moment. It's taken ages to resolve. Anyway, I'm just wondering what committee would feel about inviting the relevant officers around. Thank you.
Yeah, Dawn, I think that possibly would be a very good idea, but could you just feedback on that one, please?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I spoke to the assistant director today about the possibility of this, and he's agreed to attend the meeting in September to provide a full update on where he's up to with the actions from the audit.
Excellent, thank you.
That sounds quite satisfactory. That will be just what we want.
Yeah, great stuff. I think with Councillor Shannon, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dawn. So my question relates to page 90 as well. Thank you for clarifying in terms of that the trees are in fact limited rather than minimal in terms of the controls and the assurance. I wonder if you could just briefly, obviously we'll get a more in-depth understanding from the officers involved, but I wonder if you can unpack a little bit in terms of that particular assurance rating and what that actually means in practical terms or in terms for us as an audit committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. When we did the review of the trees, it was found that what the council does not have is a dedicated system that manages the tree stock. So what this means is, although there are inspections going on, a lot of the work that they undertake is reactive rather than proactive. So if we had a dedicated system that highlighted when trees were due for inspection, we could record when maintenance was carried out, we'd be in a much better position if we had any insurance claims to be able to defend them. It would also highlight any issues earlier on. Now I know prior to lockdown that was the route they were going down, that they were trying to procure a dedicated system. So hopefully when Mark attends in September he'll be able to provide the update on that.
That's lovely, thank you very much, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn. Do we have any other questions, please?
Councillor Rollo's requested to speak.
Okay, Councillor Rollo, would you like to put your question, please?
Thank you. A question, it's a comment really. On page 91, 7.7, the table of percentages is potentially a little confusing. Looking at the limited row, 1920 is 7%, 1819 is 6%, but I imagine that both of those were 1. Just that the base numbers changed, which has modified the percentage slightly. Would it be possible to put the actual number of reports in there as well as the percentage? It's useful to have because it gives us a journey. But I say on 21 to 26 for the full between 1920 and 1819, and I don't know what that means, whether that's a lot worse, or whether it's 1 or 2.
Yeah, that is something certainly I can do. And if you'd like, what I can do, because obviously this is an annual report, I can take that on board for next year, but what I can do is I can get you those figures and distribute them separately if the committee would like that.
I can probably work them out from the table on page 90 by hands, but it was just easier so it was in the table for next year.
Yeah, okay. Again, I'll take that on board.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Any other questions?
We've got no other questions, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Lizzie. Could I just put a question to Dawn about the internal audit report for corporate health and safety? That was the report, of course, that got an audit assurance rating of reasonable. I've noted about noise levels on here that noise test levels have not been undertaken within a reasonable timescale, and there's been a lapse in the use of departmental safety coordinators and departmental safety action plans. I think it was noted that the last sort of update was 4 years ago, and the equipment was found to be defective at that point. I'm wondering really, I mean, could we have firstly an officer for the next audit meeting, or perhaps a meeting in October, so we can talk about this particular issue? And is there anything else you would like to add about it? Thank you.
Yeah, I think given that the actions for this particular audit are all due to be implemented in October, I think, yeah, it would be wise to invite the officer in maybe for the November meeting, and then she'll be in a position, hopefully, to update on the committee on the implementation of all the actions. In terms of the equipment for the noise, what we found when we did that review was that the equipment had broken, and initially they were trying to source some parts so it could be repaired, and that proved to be problematic, and I think that's led to the delay further. I think now they've had to decide to buy new equipment. I think it's now been considered to be defunct, so that really was the reasoning behind the delay.
Right, okay, thank you, Dawn, for that. I think we could now move on, please, to agenda item 9, which is the corporate governance report. I wonder if I could bring Jackie in on this item, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The local code of governance, we bring this forward to members annually. Now, the council has local code of governance, which is produced in line with the Sit for Solace corporate governance framework document, delivering good governance in local government 2016. So what we do, it's how we demonstrate that we've got the necessary governance arrangements. And what we do, we set these arrangements out against the 7 core principles which are in that framework document. So these are set out in the report. So I wasn't intending to go through all the principles, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Any questions from the committee members on the Code for Corporate Governance, please?
No councillors have requested to speak on this item. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that then, Jackie. We can move then to item number 10, which is the draft governance statement. And I think, Jackie, would you like to take the lead on that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right, the annual governance statement, we usually bring in draft form to audit annually, and then we take it again with the annual accounts. So the council is required to produce a governance statement annually, which reports on the effectiveness of the government's arrangements in any one year, and also about any planning changes for the coming year. So within the document, it sets out how the council promotes and demonstrates values of good governance, how the council works, and this will be like the committee meetings and the structure. Also how the council gains its assurance and how we review the effectiveness of the assurance. And it also reports on the last year's key improvement areas. So for each year, the council sets some key improvements to its governance arrangements. So these are actually set out what we did during the previous year. So for this year, we had quite a number of key improvements for last year, and these were following a major review of the governance arrangements. So Audit carried out a full review during 2019, and we set out with improving quite a large amount of areas in the governance. So there are a few of these where we've actually carried out a lot of work during 2019-20, but we haven't finalised them, or we haven't fully implemented them. So what we're doing, we're suggesting that these get carried forward into 2021. And these include areas like performance management, the people strategy, and the communication strategy. Now, a number of these are nearly finalised. The communication strategy is already in draft format, ready for approval. The people strategy, we're quite far on with this. However, due to COVID, we are going to do a further review, taking into consideration the impact of COVID on how our staff operate. The performance management, last year we did a full review of performance indicators, setting out whether they were operational or strategic. However, we had a planned implementation date of June 2020, and now that COVID, we've had to deal with COVID, the pandemic, we're actually saying we'll actually delay the implementation to December 2020. So we have included some new key improvement areas following the annual audit, and these are set out in the annual governance statement. So if there's any questions on this, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jackie. Do we have any questions for Jackie regarding the draft governance?
Councillor Rollo has requested to speak.
Okay, Councillor Rollo.
Yeah, there's two things. On page 5, I think it is, which is how the council works. That one. There are two areas that aren't included in there that I'm suggesting probably should be, which is the Central Lancashire Strategic Planning Working Group and the Budget Working Group, both of which feed into the decision-making process of this authority and the Central Lancashire authorities in one case together. Now, they've always been classified as a working group and not mentioned in how the council works, but they are significant inputs to the council. And I'm wondering if next year we should not have something in there about those two working groups. Jackie, you probably need to take that to Adrian.
Yes, I have already I've spoken to Adrian about it. We're happy to include the Central Lancashire Strategic Planning Working Group on the document. What I would say about the budget working group, it is just an informal group but we could actually include it, but as long as we specify that that is an informal group.
It's not a decision-making group, except it does make decisions. The decisions that it makes get fed through somewhere. So I think it should probably be on there.
Yeah, I can.
Next year, yeah.
I'll be able to include it on this one because this is a draft document.
Right.
So if there are any changes which you need to make at this meeting, I'm happy to incorporate those in the final version. And the final version will go when we're actually agreeing the annual accounts.
Yeah. Second question, which I'm going to get shot for. On page 11, the performance management structure. Shouldn't we be including elected members within the performance management? You probably need to take that up to, I haven't put that in my list of questions, but you probably need to take that up to the senior management team.
Yeah, I'll
need to go through.
I'll take that CMT.
But
I'll take that to our corporate management team for inclusion.
The group leaders and come down, and I'll probably get shot for raising it. If you could.
Yeah, I'll raise that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Rollo. Do you have any other questions for Jackie?
Councillor Saxena is requested to speak.
Okay, Councillor Saxena, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Page 10 in particular. Earlier on, John Farrar did say that certainly with the 2020-2021 annual government statement, we would need to have a great deal on our response to COVID-19. I'm quite impressed, actually, even though it only affected the last 2 weeks of the 2019-20 year. We've got quite a substantial amount of stuff here on that. For what was only last year, it's all part of that year. So that's quite impressive, actually. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Saxena. Any other questions?
No other councillors requested to speak.
Okay, so members are asked on this item to approve the draft annual governance statement. Could we just all signal whether we approve, please?
Debbie Shannon, I approve of the proposal.
Thank you.
I approve as well.
Right. Bill Crow approves.
And I approve Ron Willow. Okay, thank you for that. I think if we could now move to item number 11 on the agenda, which is the Grant Thornton assurance. Now, members are asked to consider the responses and the chair of the committee to enable to sign the assurance letter requested by Grant Thornton. So this is the letter I've recently signed on our behalf, but we need to just confirm all members are in agreement. You've all had copies of that report, I believe. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jackie, to that?
No, nothing to add.
And, okay, so could we just confirm are all members in agreement with the assurance letter that has been put forward?
Debbie Shannon, I'm in agreement.
Thank you, Zoe.
Yes, I agree with it.
Thank you. Any other members? If you could just signal confirmation, please.
Agreed. Bill Crow.
Okay, thank you. And Ron Willam, I agree as well. So we're in agreement to that. So we can now move to agenda item 12. And just apologies for 1 second while I get this. Yeah, this is the counter fraud annual report, and I believe we have Hayley Garstang with us this evening. So welcome, Hayley, to the meeting, and understand that you take us through the counter fraud annual report, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as you know, Preston City Council hosts the team. We're all Preston employees and we do cover Fylde, Preston and Lancaster. This report specifically relates to Preston. The report outlines the objectives of the corporate inquiry team, also known as the fraud team, the staff and resources involved, the details of the shared service we host and the partnership working that we undertake. It also details the other bodies that we work with and all our performance details as well. It also covers significant areas of work that we've covered during that financial year 1920. Report is presented for information and no decision is required, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Yes. Any questions from members for Hayley?
No councillors have requested. Councillor Rollo has just requested to speak. Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering why on page 3.2.1 report, we're saying that it's one full-time investigator and 2 part-time investigators. You get on the actual statement itself, which is on 135. It's the other way around.
Yeah, just to clarify, it is 2 full-time posts equivalent, which consists of 1 full-time staff member and 2 part-time staff members.
Right. So the report on page 3.2.1 referring back to 2015 has changed.
Just say the
3.2.1. Which is saying that then it was 1 full-time and 2 part-time.
Yeah, this is across all 3 authorities. Sorry, I should have made that a bit more clear. So at Preston, it's 1 full-time investigator specifically allocated for Preston. I should have made that clear. Apologies.
Yeah, but the service overview on page 135 changes those figures around somewhere.
On page.
I've lost it, but
I'm trying to find it, so as you're saying that.
Somewhere in there, it actually says that it's 2 full-time and 1.
Yes, 2 full-time across the service, 1 full-time specifically for Preston.
Right, but on the report itself, it says there was 1 full-time and 2 part-time.
Right, that must be an error. It's 2 full-time investigators that cover all the authorities. Yeah. At Preston, it's 1 full-time equivalent post, but that is staffed by 2 part-time members of staff at Preston.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Any other questions for Hayley?
No other councillors have requested to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next item is the business plan, item 13 on the agenda, and that's really the corporate inquiry team. Again, over to Hayley, please, if she could talk us through that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the business plan for financial year 2021 for the shared service. This outlines the objectives, the service overview, responsibilities and the financial appraisal. No decision is required and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Nobody has requested to speak.
Okay, in which case, thank you very much, Hayley, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we could move to item 14 on the agenda, which is the regulatory investigatory powers item. And I think, Jackie, would you like to just run through that one for us, please?
Chair, it's been 0 since the old king were a lad.
Have we got Jackie still in the meeting?
Chair, it's showing that she's offline and then, oh, she's back now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. I don't know whether you got that, Jackie, or not, but we
Apologies, I seem to be having a few network problems.
No worries. Agenda item 14, Jackie, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act.
So are we on the item, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000?
That's right, correct, yeah. I wonder if you could just talk us through that, please.
Yes, I'll try. I think I keep getting logged off. So what we did, we used to take a quarterly report to Audit Committee, and then we took a report to Cabinet on 14th of April, and we said that what we would do is that we would present to Audit Committee if we have used these powers. Now, in the last 5 years, I'm not aware that we have used these powers. However, Preston City Council was recently the subject of a telephone-based inspection by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office. We provided a report, and it has demonstrated that we have a level of compliance that removes at present a requirement for a physical inspection. So that means they were satisfied with the telephone-based inspection. I'm not aware of any inspections or any use of the CCTV system in line with these powers. What the council has been doing, any use of CCTV has been used under different powers. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Do we have any questions from members?
I don't think any councillors have requested to speak on this item. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lizzie. Right, we're asked to just note that particular report. So we go on to item agenda 15, which is constitutional changes. And again, if I could just ask Jackie to run through that for me, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report gives details for audits. It gives details of any amendments made to the council's constitution, which has either been approved by council, cabinet, or under the monitoring officer's delegated power. One of the terms of reference of Audit Committee is to monitor and review the council's constitution. Within this report, it just sets out two different reports which have been taken to council and to Employment Committee, setting out some changes which we've made to the Constitution. One is just to reflect the Mayor's and Deputy Mayor's allowance in the Members' Allowance Scheme from 2020. Previously, this wasn't included in that scheme. And the next one is to reflect the new management structure, which is coming into place on 1st of August. We've had to do changes to allow the directors to have powers in relation to the services within their directorate. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Jackie?
No councillors have requested to speak on this item.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Jackie, for that. So we move now to item on the agenda 16, which is the date of our next meeting. The date of the next ordinary meeting of the Audit Committee is the 16th of September at 5 p.m. at the Town Hall, Preston. And finally, I'd just like to thank any members of the public that have been following this meeting, and also thank you to all the councillors for attending this very first virtual audit meeting that we've had. And I'd like to draw the meeting to a close. And thank you very much indeed for all your contributions.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.